I think my first encounter with architecture was my grandmother's house. So my father decided that before he built his own house, that he would build a house for his mother, which was my grandmother. And I remember the house being literally across the street from the church that we attend to every Sunday. And so I remember every summer that we would go to this village, this city where my grandmother lives. And it was not a single family home. It was a 3-story, actually more a 4-story structure. And in the process of doing 4 stories, and there were sections, there were balconies, and it was also business down below. So, and in the middle, there were common rooms, but then the most public was on the top. You had a kitchen and the floor. I remember this vividly because this reminded me of their first house. Their first house had the same sectional typology wherein you work, the storage. So it was a furniture store, there was a storage, there was rooms on the 3rd, and then the 4th floor was the kind of veranda, the opening and stuff. And now looking back, it was crudely made, but the social interaction that you have to go through to enter the house, to enter the store, to enter the storage, to enter the private rooms before you hit the public space was imprinted in my head. And I thought, wow, what an interesting, even on a very private home, that this friction, this idea of human interaction can happen on a daily basis. And I thought, wow, if a space, I didn't know what it's called then, but if this is truly a profession, I thought it was a builder's job. But then I realized for every building, there was always an architect. They might not call it that architect. And I find that to be both stimulating and at the same time, something that I started to aspire to. Architecture plays a big role more than just the physical structure. Oftentimes people see architecture purely as a physical construct, the built things that you build. But architecture as a structure connotes many different things. It can represent a particular cultural movement, a political position, but at the same time, it can also express a particular ethos or pedagogy, an academic pedagogy, or your viewpoint, personal viewpoint of how the world is. So it's in multiple ways, it's extremely powerful. I think Neri&Hu is by virtue an extension of me and Rosanna, So I think we're definitely rooted in culture because we're interested in culture. We're interested in history. We're interested in sort of how things come about. I always believed that a city without a philosopher, without an artist, without thinkers, and that includes architects, is a dead city. If a city is just full of business people, lawyers, even doctors, I would argue, it will not represent the sentiment, the joy and the sadness of a city. Therefore, a city needs to have the writers, the philosopher, the thinkers, the artists, the painters, and the architects to be able to manifest the state and the condition of the city itself. I think there should be no line or no differentiation. I believe rational problem solving is very much a poetry in itself. I think oftentimes it's that divide wherein form and function are clearly delineated that you actually miss the banality of the everyday, but by celebrating the everyday, the mundane, and the ordinary, and understanding the need to be able to thrive on those conditions, that in itself is poetry. If you need a lighting rod, if you need something to awaken that spirit within you, if you need a spectacle, then I don't believe that's truly architecture. That's just you trying to pop up something that is not there. But I think what is true poetry is the ability to see the everyday and to be able to celebrate what is commonly not so important. What is function, right? So for instance, a high heel, when you're wearing a high heel, right? Is it really the most comfortable? Not necessarily, but it functions differently. Right? It function, maybe you want to wear that because you want to represent a certain elegance, a certain nimbleness. I don't know, I'm just reading into that. That also serves as a function. It might be painful, it might not be comfortable, but it serves the function, right? Why do you interview? Why do you wear a tie and a blazer, even in the heat of summer? Because it allows you to have a narrative, a functional narrative that, look, I'm ready, I am logical, I am professional. That in itself is function. So before judging a society in terms of what is functional and what is not, to one society, one might be functional, and to others, it might not be. So that, to me, that's when research comes to play. It's imperative for each and every one to completely understand the context we are operating under. Because we're in a lot of pain, sometimes we complain and we moan to the doctors, right? I treat clients the same way. When they're very demanding and they say circulation needs to be this needs to be that, this needs to be that, they're just in a lot of pain. They're in a lot of pain because they don't know what to do. And so we have to be, as architects, we have to be very patient. Sometimes we just have to medicate them for a little bit, you know, and sometimes we have to put them to sleep so that we can operate properly. And so hopefully in the process of doing so, they will be thankful for us. But not all of them will think like that. They'll go find another doctor. So from the get-go, we knew that this building, which was dormant for many years, was culturally significant for Georgia itself, right? Despite the fact that in terms of its form, it was rather brutalist, the program within, be it a place wherein telegram messages were being delivered or later became a post office, it had a civic and social component to it. So within the confine of this brutalist, Soviet-inspired architecture, we knew that we need to continue the public and civic life that was once here, if it was to be successful. Instead of bringing the piazza out, we brought the street in. So instead of being extroverted, we decided to be introverted. We brought the piazza in, we lift the garden, we have a piazza, we have a park, and we decided to, in order for this to work, we should have a mini city, little city within the building. I mean, if we were to restore it properly, exactly brick by brick, like the way the Venetians would do it, right? Then the windows would not be where it is today. The mullions are super thick, right? It needs to be completely refined. Is it affordable that way? That's a different thing. So that's also a sense of responsibility, right? You need to balance. Do you then, because you can't afford it, leave the building dormant and let it die? So we do believe that it needs to be re-engaged. It needs to reignite, that the spirit within this building needs to be renewed. If you notice our ground floor, the window, the mullions are smaller because we're trying to break the scale. Yes, the top above, we can't do anything, but down below, we've made it more vertical. By doing so, First, it's also more affordable, but second, we broke the scale. So when you're walking along the street, the window panes and panels are not so institutionalized. It's more domesticated, right? And by distancing all the programs away from the skin, we're also making a very strong point that the spirit of the building remains as is. I think they already had a professional team, a team that understands, know how to do hotels. They've done one, they've done a few. So I think that was really helpful. But they were still pretty traditional in how they approach hotel. So it took us a long time. The learning curve was a challenge for us. I think they were taken aback by our approach because obviously it's very different in that we decide we're going to have roads inside this building. I mean, who in their right mind would want to do that? That's not maximizing the seats, right? And we would argue, why don't we just take the seat and put it on the road, like as if you would in Paris, you know? The rooms, dividing it in the room we're in, it's super long and super deep. How do we make this significant? And so we decide to use the train car analogy for a traveler. So it's okay to be compact. It's okay to be tight. It's okay. So it's contrary to everything that the hospitality guidebook would tell you, right? So it's a challenge working with us. I know that. I think to say that it was all smooth, I'd be lying to you. Absolutely not. I think the first year was quite contentious because a lot of people were not believers. Right? It's very hard. They're used to, they're grounded, they know and I can't blame them. That's all they know, what a hotel is like. And for us to throw in this crazy idea, city, bringing the street, bringing in Georgian courtyard into the middle, having lights shining into the ballroom. That's absolutely insane, you know? The train cars like into your bedroom, so it's compartmentalized, the whole thing. But I'm glad because George when push comes to shove, it always gets straight, goes all the way back to George. And actually, George is quite a visionary. He actually listens and he thinks and he's like, I have a few points, you know? We've lost on a few. I don't need to tell you which one, but we've managed to convince, it's not about winning, convince to a point where in many of the project managers here are actually very happy and they're very convinced, you know? I do believe that I want, just like what Aldo Rossi talks about, is that it will ignite certain memory. And I hope that the city is brought into this monolith structure. I do believe that the vibrancy of its venue will be in its own character. The garden will have its own character. The Thai restaurant, the Italian restaurant, hopefully the ballroom will have its own identity, and people will most likely gravitate to one or the other. But I think the most important thing is that dialogue, that conversation, that fragmentary friction, the toleration of this harmony, having different programs come together. It's not one big hotel, but rather a city broken up within that structure that just happens to have a hotel. I'm very happy seeing a lot of people in here. And maybe this is just maybe the opening, but I see the vibrancy of the restaurant. I'm really excited. The fact that, you know, and I'm also very happy that George took it seriously and actually appointed chefs for each places. And they're significant chefs, you know. Instead of treating it like a hotel restaurants, he decided, okay, different venue needs to have different stakeholders. And I think that's very important to have its own identity within an infrastructure that deals with community. You know, it's not a contradiction itself. In fact, it's about the fragmentary differences that will allow us to have a dialogue. And in this dialogue and in this discourse that we create a better community.